For a little background, I'm pretty excited today. I took an interest in digital humanities as an undergrad, and I've worked on projects like the Wide Wide World at SIUE and Explorer's Legacy at University of Iowa. In grad school, I took classes on digital archiving, digital preservation and stewardship, metadata and organizational management, and digital humanities. And then before coming to Beloit, I worked at University of Lynchburg as their outreach and public services librarian, but I was also a founding member of their campus-wide digital humanities initiative, where I gave a series of lectures on DH and digital pedagogy and served as the library's liaison to the digital humanities. So I worked with a lot of faculty, staff, and students to facilitate and support digital projects. So the topic of digital storytelling, curation, and presentation is really kind of a natural fit with some of my personal research interests. Okay, so what does this mean? This is kind of where I confess to you that these three topics are out of order. So before you can actually tell a story, you have to gather your information. So I'm actually starting with this idea of curation. And curation is a really conscious collection of materials and data and media that fits within very specific guidelines. So if, for example, I'm curating a collection of band t-shirts, I need to exclude anything that isn't a t-shirt, like a cardigan or a hoodie, or a tank top, anything that's like a solo artist, because they're not technically bands. And that's still kind of broad. So maybe I'm specifically looking at the punk genre, for example. So when I curate this collection of t-shirts, then I need to kind of share it with the world. So this is where the storytelling comes in. So I've selected each of these items for my collection, and they tell a story. So, you know, where do they come from? Did I get it from a concert? Maybe I went to Warped Tour one year. Did I find it in a vintage store halfway across the world when I was on my study abroad experience? So those kind of things. We talk about the story behind curating our collection, but then there's also a story with the particular item. So think about, you know, who's the band? What have they contributed to the genre? What's their history? Questions like that. So this is where the challenge comes in. We've really taken something that has a story and we fit in very specific boxes. So we've checked off, yes, it's a t-shirt, yes, it's a punk band, but now we have to communicate and assign some sort of importance or emotion to this item, because that's how it's going to connect with our audience. So we have to think about how these items work together. So at this point, maybe we realize that it's hard to get an audience to connect with a bunch of t-shirts that I bought at Hot Topic in the mall as a teenager. So maybe I need to cull my collection down a little bit more. So maybe I've decided to omit all t-shirts not obtained at a concert. So as you go through this process, you curate your collection, you know what your story is. Now you have to decide the best way to present the material. So when you think about specific materials, think about if it's a physical item or something that's born digital, and how that's best viewed. So a physical item being presented in a digital format, you're going to have to take some sort of picture or image. Something that's born digital can be manipulated a little bit more. Maybe they're best viewed from a timeline or a video or a map or a blog, which coincidentally is what we're talking about today. So now that you have your format, we have to think about our audience again. So what types of technology do they use? What type of interaction do we expect from them? Maybe we want to encourage them to comment and react to specific items. So my audience, for example, loves music, specifically punk music. They use YouTube and Instagram and Twitter to connect with all of these artists and bands. And based on this, I think the best way for me to tell the story of my collection is through a video or a microblog. So I could film YouTube videos about my collection and I could show it and tell the story. Or I could create a microblog, which is like a Twitter or an Instagram or Tumblr, and I could share it that way. So that way my audience can interact, comment, like, share. So now that we've talked about that, is this appropriate for your class? And I think the answer is yes. The idea of digitally presenting data kind of extends to a lot of different tools, and there's really something for everybody. It spans disciplines. So it's going to take a little bit of creativity, but I think this could pretty easily be implemented in classrooms spanning all of the disciplines represented. So now the next question is why? Well, shoot, there we go. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons why we should implement some form of digital tool or component into our class. So if we look back to the learning outcomes to our strategic plan, you'll see that something like teaching digital literacy and technology skills really fits right in for the effective communicating, creative problem solving, being professionally agile. So employers are really looking for people who work well in teams, have excellent communication and writing skills, understand big data and can apply it in a real world situation, analyze problems and come up with creative solutions. And these are all skills that can be strengthened through a variation of assignments, especially when those assignments include a collaborative or digital component. So it's also worth mentioning here, our current situation, it's kind of uncharted territory. So we can either view it as an inconvenience of having to move our entire class lives online, or use it as an opportunity to kind of grow and teach new skills. So taking advantage of our current focus on online learning is important. So now we're going to look at what's possible. So before we go too far, I do want to reiterate that these tools are pretty robust, and we could hold separate workshops on each one of these, but there's really not time for that. So my goal today is to kind of show you what's possible, what tools are available, and kind of share kind of some ideas and ways to possibly implement these into your classroom. I've linked tutorials and examples for each of these tools in the slides, and we're going to share those on the teaching and learning workshop page after. So does anybody have questions so far? Okay, cool. So we're going to start with mapping. Maps can be a really powerful storytelling tool, especially when you merge maps with like information databases. You can produce a product that allows people to visualize data in kind of a brand new way. So for example, if I'm in an English class and we're reading the Odyssey, I can kind of plot the locations from the story to create kind of a visualization of the tale. So at each location, I could describe where they are, what's happening, who's involved. And then as I walk through the map with somebody who's never read the story, kind of point by point, they can get kind of a broad picture of what's happening. In a science class, I could record sightings of rare birds to help kind of visualize migration patterns. In a history class, I could record the path of a Civil War battle. In a health class, I could record the locations of kind of local businesses that have reclosed due to a COVID outbreak. And that can kind of help visualize the impact of the pandemic on our local economy. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of fit this into your class. And depending on the assignment, mapping can encourage things like critical thinking, promoting global awareness, and it also builds technology skills and introduces students to kind of a real world application of technology. So let me show you a few tools. So this is Google Maps. And I'm sure that everybody here has used Google Maps at some point. But you can also create custom maps with this platform. So it's a really easy way to incorporate mapping into the classroom. Students are already familiar with the platform. So this kind of idea of creating a custom map really isn't too far of a leap. for students kind of apprehensive about new technology. So let me kind of show you what it looks like here. So kind of as you can see from this video, Google Maps allows you to create custom maps embedding narrative text, images, and multimedia content, which results in a really nice but simple spatial visualization. So for this particular map, I added 3 layers. So I added school, home, and work. I don't think that says home, but I don't remember what it says. And I was able to kind of customize the color and the icons of my location pins. So like this one's orange and this one's blue and that one's green, to kind of separate my kind of layers. So I can turn layers on and off, which kind of shows you kind of different patterns of movement. And I can create lines between paths. So this over here is my last job. This up here is my current job, for example. So this tool also kind of allows you to import data from a CSV file. So it's an Excel or a Google Sheet that you save with comma separated value, which makes it really easy to create a map. So, and there's a link to this specific map down here on the slide handout when you get that later, if you want to kind of play around with it. And let's see, this next tool is ArcGIS Story Maps. So ArcGIS itself is a paid tool, and we don't necessarily have access to that. But Story Maps is a free tool within ArcGIS. So it does the exact same thing as Google Maps. It just has kind of a sleeker output. So the image is a bigger feature, and the map is a smaller feature. So I inputted most of the same data that you saw before, and I can, click on these. They're separated by color. So let me show you this one. Okay, so this tool also allows you to import data from an Excel file, which again makes it really easy to use. So these are the mapping resources that you'll have available later, and maybe Kelly can post these in the chat. But does anybody have any questions about either of those tools before we move on?
This is Yafa.
Yes.
Sue Swanson teaches an ArcGIS course.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that you and the people listening are aware of that, because there may be some students who are taking her course who could use the more advanced tool, because we have ArcGIS on campus.
Yes. So I think we have ArcGIS. My understanding is it's in a specific lab.
Yeah, it's in the 4th floor computer lab in the Science Center, and only there.
Yes. So in theory, that makes it a little bit more difficult for students to access, but because we have this new virtual desktop, it's possible that students not taking those classes could access ArcGIS as well. So that's a good point to mention. And with the more advanced paid version of ArcGIS, there's a lot more features. So now we're going to look at infographics and data visualization. So A lot of disciplines emphasize collecting data, but then after we collect this data, we need to present it to an audience that might not be as knowledgeable about the topic. So it's really important to teach communicating data with a larger, more diverse audience. So this is where infographics and data visualization tools come into play. So everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of an infographic. It's been around for a while, but it's a really simple way to present big data to a large audience. So you can create an infographic about any topic, and they can be used for things like advocacy, argumentation. You could use it as a teaching tool. It's useful in research presentations. So it has a lot of applications. It's really as simple as collecting data and then laying it out in a way that makes it kind of easy to read and understand using text, color, images. But this graphic representation really grabs an audience's attention. So it's more visually appealing than a bunch of numbers on a page, which really helps them grasp information quickly. So for creating infographics, we recommend using Adobe Spark or Canva. Adobe Spark is a tool that we have available through Beloit College for free. But it's an online design application that allows you to create graphics, posters, and short videos. And it's also a tool that I'm going to be talking about again in a few minutes. And then Canva is also a graphic design platform, but you can create presentations, posters, social media graphics, pamphlets. So there's kind of a wide range of resources that you can use to build infographics. So I've done it before. It's pretty easy. You just have to kind of be inspired to kind of play around and see what works and what's visually appealing. But it can be a really good way to kind of present data. Then we have the data visualization. So this is a bit more complex, even though it's really just another form of infographic. So infographics, the appeal is that it doesn't include a large amount of data. It just kind of gets to the point. A data visualization, on the other hand, is literally made up of the data points. So everything you see is data. And this could be presented in a chart, a graph, a map, a table. So for this, I'm recommending Tableau. So Tableau is a data visualization software, and it kind of does complex data modeling. It's got a wide variety of visualization outputs, and Tableau public accounts are free. So let me kind of show you what this looks like. This is just one example, but there are many other examples on the website. So in this example, they've calculated how many female leaders each country had in a specific year, and then plotted that on a chart. And you can filter by country to kind of see where your country falls. The visual is a little bit distracting because they're all dots. So if you're not good at low contrast distinguish, it might be a little difficult to find the country you're looking for. But this is an example of something you could do in Tableau. So this is kind of a pretty complex tool. And I kind of recommend watching, YouTube tutorials and reading the documentation for kind of a better idea of what's possible. But there are kind of an inspiration page within the website that is linked here that can give you kind of some inspiration. And again, you'll find these links later in the slides. So does Anybody have questions about infographics or data visualization?
Haley, I've got a quick question. Is Canva free?
Yes.
Okay, because when you go online, it looks like they only show you the pro version.
Okay. So Canva is a little bit funny. They used to have a nonprofit kind of account that you could sign in with your like tax number and stuff. They don't do that anymore. So there's free content and paid content within the tool. So you just have to be really conscious of which images you're selecting. So like an icon might be free, but then a similar icon might be paid depending on who created it and uploaded it. But for the most part, it is available free online.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No problems. Anybody else?
You said we have access to Adobe Spark through the college. How do we access it to get the paid version?
So all you have to do is sign in to Adobe Spark using your enterprise ID. So we have an enterprise account for Adobe. So when you go into Adobe Spark, it'll ask you to sign in, and it'll pick up that if you're on campus. If you're off campus, you might have to select enterprise ID, but then you just log in with your Beloit credentials and it'll access.
Awesome, thank you.
No problems. Okay, so now we're going to look at timelines. So timelines are kind of visual representations of time that help create connections between the past and the present. And for this, I'm recommending Timeline.js. It's an open source tool powered by Google Sheets. And it can build some visually rich and interactive timelines. So let me show you an example. Sorry to get personal, but all of my examples I made the last week, so they're all kind of my own stuff. So here is a timeline. Okay, so in this example, I used a Google Sheet to write out a series of kind of random events that happened during my first year at Beloit. And I can kind of drill down to the exact time of the event. So if I wanted to kind of catalog the events of one day and time, I could. But I've uploaded images by uploading them to a Google Drive and linking the shared link into the spreadsheet. Although I could also use kind of open images from Google Images, Flickr, and other sites. So I've added title, text, and then I can use kind of basic HTML tags to emphasize, so bold, italics, which is pretty standard. So it's very easy. It does one thing pretty well. And this was built by the Night Lab, which is kind of an educational department that does digital humanities. So that's the timeline tool. I don't have a lot to say about it, but it is pretty easy to implement. Does anybody have questions about that? Okay. So, I have tools and resources for that as well. Next, we're looking at videos. So, really straightforward. We already kind of know about what's possible, but there are a lot of tools available for creating videos. I will say that it's possible that students have a platform that they prefer. So depending on your assignment, you can either indicate a specific tool that you want students to use, or you could just indicate kind of the format. So maybe all videos have to be uploaded to Moodle as an MP4, and students can use whatever they're most comfortable with to kind of create. So today I'm looking at Adobe Spark and Flipgrid. And just as a side note, these tools are different from the ones we're recommending for recording lectures. So these are just kind of to present short videos. So this is a video created in Adobe Spark. So, and it has sound, but I don't know that I shared my sound with you. Okay, so that was more of kind of an animated slideshow, but you can record audio and video to input. So it's really easy to create your slides, add image, text, and background music. Adobe Spark has this catalog of Creative Commons licensed materials that you can use to kind of build your presentation. So all of the music is licensed for students to use freely without kind of issue of copyright, which is nice. So you can also add in kind of video clips. So you wouldn't necessarily have to record your face, but you could add in maybe a short clip of a movie or a documentary if you wanted to. And then each slide you can record audio for up to 30 seconds. So the really fast way to get around the 30-second kind of cap is to duplicate your slide as many times as it takes to kind of get through what you need to say there. So I've definitely done that before. But it's pretty sleek. There are kind of a lot of options. There's definitely different built-in themes and slide layouts. You can kind of play around and see what works best. And I've noticed that there are students that already kind of know this tool. So it could be a really easy way to kind of implement some sort of digital component into your class. The next one is Flipgrid. So I'm sorry that this is so small, but Flipgrid is a website where the instructor can create like categories, and then students can respond to prompts with specific video reflections. So you might say, you know, we read the first chapter of the Odyssey here, reflect on what you read. And then students could have like a 90-second response time. You can select their response times to kind of respond. So it's a really great way to kind of participate in asynchronous discussions where you're still seeing faces. It's really very intuitive. So in this example, I've added a postcard, some text. There'll be an image, a drawing, an emoji. So you have a lot of different options of what you can add. And this is also available as a kind of a web platform or as an iOS app. And so students without like dedicated laptops, if they are using their phones to participate in class, it's a really easy thing that they can use. So again, not everything has to be super ugly. This was just as an example. But you can record your face, you can record audio. So it's a pretty easy tool. Kelly and I tried it out this summer in the library, and we were pretty happy with our results. So definitely worth looking into. Okay, so does anybody have questions about the video tools that I mentioned, or any video tools? Okay, so the last thing I want to get into are stories and blogs. So this is a really easy way to take things we're already doing and kind of twist them with a digital component. So I'm going to talk about Adobe Spark, WordPress, and Google Sites. And when you think about using these tools, I really encourage you to think kind of beyond the traditional research paper. So one of the skills that we have an opportunity to teach here is writing for the web. And that's not something that we always talk about in a college classroom. It's a different style of writing. But it's one that students can really benefit from, especially in the current job market. So these tools create an opportunity to kind of assign formal and informal, highly creative writing activities that incorporate multimedia. So the first one is something created in Adobe Spark page. So this is an example of a photo essay created on Adobe Spark, and it's basically a very simple website used to do one full assignment. So you wouldn't necessarily add to this website with a different assignment, although you could if you wanted to. So again, the benefits of Adobe Spark here are that it's a free tool. It's got free unlimited hosting. The Creative Commons licensed photos are really a big thing. And then it's very easy to share your finished project. So you can share it as a video or on social media or as a URL, or so there are a lot of different ways for students to submit things to you for grading. So this particular assignment kind of focused on incorporating primary sources into an informal story. So let me kind of show you this. So it's an informal essay with pictures, and the focus was on captions and creativity and finding your specific kind of voice. So this student got creative and included poetry, but there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of manipulate this. So in this instance, students were asked to sit in nature and observe for a really short period of time, and then take pictures of what they noticed. And then they wrote kind of this reflection essay about their experience. So the main focus was how they incorporated images into their story to create a visual product. But this could also be an opportunity for students to explore different types of essays and writing, like braided essays, letters, memos, business writing, technical writing, instructional essays. There are a lot of different ways you could incorporate this into your classroom. And I'm a really big advocate for informal writing assignments because they help build student confidence in their writing skills, help find their unique voice, identify subjects they're passionate about, incorporate primary sources. And all of this will eventually transfer over when they write a more academic, traditional research paper. So that is Adobe Spark. Then we get into WordPress and Google Sites. So now we're talking about blogging in the classroom. So as an undergraduate, I took one of the, if not the first iteration of this blogging collective course at SIUE. And I was really impressed with how my professor organized it. So I wanted to share it as kind of my best example of blogging in the classroom. So I will say, unfortunately, you won't find any writing of mine on this site. Just a really big shame because my long form post on Ode to a Grecian Urn would have probably made you cry. I don't know that that's true, but we'll say it is. So all of this was built on WordPress. So let me show you what it looks like. So essentially, it's a traditional blog used in kind of a different way. So she set up one class blog and then added student contributors. So you can see the bloggers over there on the right. And the main page is student writing. So you can link to all of their assignments. Students can comment on each other's posts. But then the tabs across the top focus on things like the schedule. So she was very specific with what students would be doing, what posts each week, which really helps with the organization. Course policies, I liked this specifically because it mentions writing in an online environment. So that kind of talks about, you know, your writing reflecting on the college because it's publicly available. So making sure you do things like proofread. She offers different options for assignments for flexibility, which I really appreciate because someone doing a teaching degree could use lesson planning and then use this in the future, whereas somebody who's, you know, an English major and likes to write could do a more traditional research mode. And flexibility here, especially this next semester, is important because we're not necessarily sure where our students are at and what they have access to resource-wise, so they can kind of pick what's best for them. I like that when I did this class, I was asked to sign up for some long form posts and some short form posts. So there's kind of a variety of different assignments, but that made it easier for her to grade because she was more focused on like the long form writing than the short form. Let's see. The grading and assignments section is really specifically clear, which is important. Students know exactly what you're expecting of them. And then the resources tab over here, I think, is really well built. There's specific things that she's requiring, like quote integration. So she kind of looks at that when she builds the course and provides a tutorial at the beginning on how students can do that to kind of give them an idea of the process and see exactly what's expected of them. So there are a lot of other examples of classroom blogs, and they represent different courses and disciplines, but kind of from a student perspective, I think this format works pretty well. It also takes the opportunity to explain exactly why you're having students write in a blog, which is something that they will question. Why are you having me do this is a thing that we hear a lot. It gives them essentially the resources they need to be successful. So does anybody have questions about blogging? Okay, so again, when you decide to do a classroom blog, it's kind of a big time investment, but it can be very successful. Here are some resources that I found particularly helpful when I was starting blogging in the classroom. So these will be available in the chat maybe, or when I send out the slides later. So, and again, I have tools and resources available. Okay, so final considerations. Take baby steps, start really small. So when you're working with technology, especially if it's new, there are going to be some kinks at first. It's a lot better to start small and have a really good plan. It's going to result in a better product. So, and if everything that I've kind of shown you today overwhelms you, that doesn't mean that you can't incorporate technology into your classroom. I would encourage you to have students incorporate multimedia into discussion board posts. So like links to YouTube videos that relate to the topic, or audio clips that they particularly felt were relevant. And you can also encourage collaboration by using tools like Google Docs, which are things that students already know how to use. So those are really simple, easy ways to kind of start towards incorporating more technology into your class. And now that we have this opportunity to incorporate technology, it can be really very easy to go overboard, overwhelming both yourself and your students. So I encourage limiting the number of tools you're using, but then using them really well. So this kind of focuses on considering student workload. And because we're doing mods, students are only having one other course to worry about at a time. But if each course is using 5 different tools that they have to then learn and implement, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Everything that's on the public web represents the college, which can be a really great marketing tool for people to discover what's happening at Beloit. But I highly recommend encouraging students to write in drafts before publishing things so that they can do things like spell check and proper grammar. I know our students are great, but sometimes things slip by. So just having everything polished before it goes on the final kind of web site would be helpful. Only use digital tools if they're going to enhance the learning experience. So essentially, don't use technology for the sake of using it. But if you've got a plan, you're specific with why you chose the tool, you can explain to students what they're getting out of using this. That can be a really powerful way to implement technology into the classroom. So this also means that not every assignment that you've used before can be altered to fit into kind of using digital tools. So you may need to create new assignments or heavily edit some of the assignments that you're already using. And lastly, have fun, be creative, and don't get discouraged. It can take time to successfully implement technology into a course. So after the first mod, I encourage you to reflect and assess on what happened. Maybe you need to make adjustments, but if it doesn't work out in the first mod, don't give up entirely. You know, from now on, we're really going to probably always have some technical component into our classes. We're not ever going to be able to go back to what happened before the pandemic. So we can look at this as kind of an investment for the future instead of like a Band-Aid for the present. So, questions about digital storytelling, curation, and presentation?
I have a question. Hello, this is Gabriela. To use for a literature class, what would you recommend for commentary of specific paragraphs from my main text? So I would like to see their comments and they can also see each other's comments. What tool would you recommend, please?
Okay, so you could do kind of a text analysis tool there. So on the digital resources page, which maybe Kelly can link to, there is a list of tools that you can use for text analysis. I believe one of those is, Let me just pull it up really quickly. I don't want to tell you wrong. Okay, it is Perusal, which is something that
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes, in fact, Joseph and I went to a workshop. So that's the one you would also recommend?
yes, it's something that some faculty already started using last semester. So I think going forward, it's important to kind of stick with the same tools.
Okay.
So, but you could also, if you're not looking at like text annotation, something I was talking to a group of ACM faculty about on Monday was kind of like live tweeting a kind of a reading or a video. So you could have students pause at specific, like if you're reading Shakespeare, everything's numbered, like the lines. So you can say, pause here at line 700 and reflect on what you've just read. So you could do this using Flipgrid. So you can see like student video reactions from that chunk of text. Or you could have students kind of write it out on a Google Doc or share it in a discussion on Moodle. So just this idea that you're asking them to consciously pause at specific points in the assignment to reflect on what they've just kind of read could be valuable there.
Thank you.
No problems. Other questions? Okay. So I wanted to leave you by saying that we are here to support you, both the Teaching and Learning Initiative and LITS in general. So as you're exploring, if you run into questions or you want us to point you to kind of documentation and resources on a specific tool, feel free to reach out. We have our Ask a Librarian chat on the website, which gives you a direct chat to somebody from LITS during the day. And it creates a support ticket after hours that we'll answer as soon as we get back in. So that could be a way to get in contact with us. Also, I know most all of you, so you have our email addresses, you've got access to our phones. So we're really here to help you build your classes. We want you to use us as a resource. So please let us know how we can help. Other than that, I think that was a pretty fast presentation. I'm proud of myself.
I just have a quick question, Haley.
Yes.
This is Donna. So if we decide to use one of these actually as an assignment, that is have students do an assignment based on one of these tools, are you and Kelly available to say do a half-hour, 40-minute drop-by to instruct students or help them with that?
Yes. So Kelly and I are still doing instruction for the next semester. It could be on a tool, it could be on, information literacy. So you can invite us into your classroom. If you're doing online, probably that's how we'll come in. If there's any kind of online component, that's kind of how we're being kind of asked to proceed, but we could probably come up with arrangements for in-person as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anything else? All right, I am going to put the recording and the slides on the Teaching and Learning Initiative page, so you can look back there later today and find all of that. So with that, thank you so much. Have a great day.